My name is Ethan Hayes, and I'm 38 years old. I make my home here in Miami, Florida, inside a waterfront estate on Key Biscayne where the Atlantic whispers against the shore all through the night. It's a sound that serves as a constant, gentle reminder that beauty persists in the world, even when your own heart has been broken for what feels like an eternity. To the public, I am a writer, a best-selling author and motivational speaker. My books, from Echoes in the Void to The Embers We Carry, have found their way into millions of homes across the globe, translated into more than 20 languages. I've stood on brightly lit stages in massive auditoriums from Chicago to international conferences in Sydney, sharing my story about navigating immense pain to rediscover a reason for living. It's a strange reality. People will pay a small fortune to listen to me for a single hour, and an entire team manages the whirlwind of book tours, television appearances, and lucrative publishing contracts. I don't list these things to impress anyone. The numbers in my bank account are large enough that I could stop working today and never worry again. What I do now is fueled by a deep-seated passion, a personal calling that feels more like a mission I assigned myself long ago. This house is a physical manifestation of that career. Its living room a cavern of glass with an unobstructed view of the sea, an infinity pool on the roof that melts into the sky, and a garage that shelters 3 different luxury cars. But all of that is just noise. The most valuable thing in my entire life isn't the money, the literary prizes I've collected, or the firm handshakes from powerful executives. No, the most precious thing is Olivia. She's my 14-year-old daughter, and she is the one true anchor in my life. I'm a widower. 4 years have passed since my wife Claire was taken from us in a car crash. It was a miserable rainy night. A truck hydroplaned on the freeway, and in one terrible screeching instant the woman I adored was simply gone, leaving Olivia and me adrift in a silence that feels like it will never end. The memory of having to tell my daughter that her mother was never coming home is branded onto my soul. She was just 10 years old and my words didn't even make her cry. I watched her, completely stunned by her stillness. Instead, she just stared up at me with those wide, clear eyes, the same exact shade as Claire's, and asked a question that shattered what was left of me. "Dad, you're not going to leave me too, are you?" I pulled her into an embrace so tight I could barely breathe, the promise catching in my throat. I swore I would always be there, even as a voice inside me screamed that I could never be enough to fill her mother's space. Now Olivia is 14. She's brilliant and perceptive, and she carries a quiet strength that I know I lack. Her long brown hair is almost always pulled back in a ponytail, and when she smiles, it's a flash of light that reminds me there are still things in this life worth fighting for. She devours books, not only mine, which she reads with a critical eye, but sprawling sci-fi epics and colorful graphic novels too. She also loves to sing, and I love to hear it, even if she insists she sounds like, in her words, a cat in a blender. Our time together is what I treasure most. Those simple rituals have become sacred. The mornings are filled with the scent of my coffee brewing while Olivia butters toast, and the evenings often find us on the rooftop watching the tide roll in while we talk about everything from a tough algebra problem to a new character for my next novel. This house on Key Biscayne, our home, is the only place on earth where I truly feel at peace. My sanctuary is a private study with a heavy oak desk, a wall of books climbing to the ceiling, and a single wide window that frames the Atlantic. A framed photograph of Claire sits on the corner of my desk, and I find myself looking at it constantly. Her smile is a silent command to keep going, to keep living for Olivia's sake. I do my best work just as dawn spills gold across the water, turning the sea into a glittering canvas. Without fail, Olivia will eventually push the door open, a mug of hot chocolate in her hands. Her presence always feels like a welcome interruption. "So, Dad," she'll ask, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "new chapter? Did you kill off any important characters today?" Just like that, her humor slices through the quiet solitude, and I can't help but laugh. But our life isn't all morning light and Olivia's easy laughter. A shadow follows me, a persistent darkness I can never quite outrun no matter how far I've come. It's the shadow of my birth family, the people I've spent my adult life trying to keep at arm's length, but from whom I can never truly break free. My father, Robert Hayes, is 75 years old. He is a cold, authoritative man whose entire world is built on the foundation of wealth and power. He clawed his way to the top as a real estate magnate, carving out an empire from undeveloped land across Florida. He prides himself on having built it all from nothing, and he has always looked at me as a flighty dreamer, an embarrassment to the Hayes name. "Books and speeches. That's just a game, Ethan," he once told me, his voice laced with a contempt so thick it felt like a physical weight. "A real man builds things you can touch, things that last, like I have." It didn't matter that I showed him news clippings praising my work. To him, any success that didn't mirror his own was, and still is, utterly worthless. My mother, Eleanor, who is 73, is a far more complicated puzzle. She's a woman caught between her husband's unyielding will and her own quiet disappointments, which makes her loyalty a constantly shifting thing. She maintains the facade of a perfect mother, complete with a warm smile, a gentle tone, and words of concern that sound almost entirely sincere. She makes a point to call at least once a month, asking about Olivia, inquiring about my latest project. Yet beneath the surface of those conversations, I always feel a chasm of unspoken resentment. My mother envies my life, though she would die before ever admitting it. I remember when I was invited to give a keynote speech at a major conference in Paris. She called to offer her congratulations, but her voice was so tight it was as if she were strangling the words. "You're just so fortunate, Ethan," she'd said, and I could practically taste the bitterness behind the sentiment. Not everyone is handed those kinds of opportunities. She hates that I've built a world for myself so far beyond what she and my father ever imagined for me, and that I did it without a single dollar of their help. And then there's my younger brother, Mark. He's 35 now, and he used to be my only real friend in that house. When we were little, we were a team. We'd spend hours building elaborate forts in the backyard and hiding out in our shared bedroom to block out the sound of our parents fighting. But as we got older, Mark made a different choice. He desperately wanted our father's approval, wanted to be the son Robert could be proud of. But every attempt he made ended in disaster. He launched his own business, which collapsed in less than 2 years and left behind a mountain of debt our parents had to settle. Since that failure, Mark has lived completely under their thumb, working a pointless job at our father's real estate firm and subsisting on the allowance they give him. I try not to judge him for it. We all have to find our own way. But the thing that truly hurts is the way he looks at me now. It's a toxic brew of jealousy and resentment that I can feel from across a room. It's a look that says my success is somehow responsible for his failures, as if I took something that should have been his. Whenever I make the trip to see them, Mark plasters on a friendly smile and engages in superficial small talk. But there's no warmth behind it. It's all a performance. I can feel the falseness of it, and worse, I know Olivia can too. She doesn't talk much about her grandparents or her Uncle Mark, but I see the way she watches them, picking up on the subtle tensions I wish I could shield her from. Once, as we were preparing for one of our obligatory visits to their home in Palm Beach, Olivia turned to me with a serious expression. "Dad, why do we always have to go to their house? I don't think Grandma and Grandpa even like you very much." I forced a laugh and messed up her hair, falling back on a tired platitude. That's just how families are sometimes, sweetie. They can be complicated. But as the words left my mouth, I knew she had seen straight through the pretense. Olivia has an intuition that cuts through all my attempts to downplay the truth. My family resides in Palm Beach, in a lavish mansion my father purchased back in the 1980s. It's an enormous property surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens overflowing with flowers. It's a beautiful sight, I'm sure, but it's one I actively avoid. I have asthma and a severe allergy to pollen, particularly ragweed, which makes their yard a minefield for me. My inhaler is a constant companion on these visits, a small piece of security I grip in my pocket even though I rarely have to use it. My parents are well aware of my condition, but my mother is fiercely proud of her garden. "Ethan, you just need to learn to embrace the outdoors," she'll say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Don't be so fragile." I've learned it's better to just smile and change the subject, but I always double-check that my inhaler is within reach before I step onto their property. Our relationship has always been a fragile, difficult thing. I walked out of that house at 18 with $200 to my name and a wild dream of being a writer. My father didn't hold back. He called me a fool to my face. My mother wept, but her tears weren't for my well-being. I knew even then that she was crying out of fear that I would bring shame upon the family name. When my first novel was published and unexpectedly climbed the bestseller lists, their attitude toward me shifted, but not in the way a son might hope for. Suddenly, my father was grilling me about sales figures and royalty percentages. My mother started peppering me with questions about the famous people I was meeting. And Mark just went quiet, but the envy in his eyes spoke volumes. I am acutely aware of how they perceive me now. They look at my financial success, the estate, the cars, the money in the bank, and they don't see a son or a brother. They see a walking, talking vault. I've maintained the connection primarily for Olivia. She loves her grandparents, even though I can tell she feels the hollowness in their affections. My mother is always sending Olivia gifts, extravagant, impersonal things like a designer handbag Olivia would never use. Mark sometimes brings his children over to play with her, but I've noticed how his conversations with me always circle back to my career, my new deals, my travel schedule. It feels less like catching up and more like he's searching for information, though I can't imagine why. One morning, while I was lost in my work, the phone on my desk buzzed. It was my mother. "Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "you and Olivia simply must come to our 40th wedding anniversary party. We're having it here at the house in Palm Beach. It will be such a wonderful time. It's been ages since we had the whole family together." There was an unusual insistence in her tone, a pressure that set my teeth on edge. "Mom, I'm not sure," I hedged, my mind already racing for an excuse. "I'll have to look at my calendar. Olivia has a lot going on with school and I have a speaking event in Boston coming up." "Oh, don't you dare say no to me, Ethan," she cut in, the sweetness evaporating. "This is a very special occasion. Olivia will have a wonderful time." Her voice was still soft, but there was an unmistakable command behind it. My gaze drifted out the window to the patio where Olivia was stretched out on a lounge chair, completely absorbed in a book. As if she could feel me watching her, she looked up and gave me a quick, radiant smile. That was all it took. I let out a slow breath. "All right, Mom. We'll be there." I ended the call, but a cold knot of anxiety was already tightening in my gut. Something about my mother's forced enthusiasm, the sheer intensity of her insistence, made me feel like I had just willingly walked onto a chessboard without having any idea of the rules. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself it was nothing more than a simple family gathering, a chance for Olivia to spend time with her grandparents and cousins. It would be fine. On the day we drove down to Palm Beach, the sky was a perfect cloudless blue. The sun poured down onto the coastal highway, making the ocean glitter like a sheet of hammered silver. Olivia sat beside me in the passenger seat, earbuds in, humming softly to a song by The Weeknd. I glanced over at her, and the sight of her content smile eased some of the tension in my chest, but the heaviness remained. Before we left, I had checked my bag for the third time to make absolutely certain my inhaler was nestled in its usual side pocket. My asthma has been a part of my life since I was a kid, and while it's mostly under control, I never go anywhere without my rescue inhaler. Especially not to a place filled with floral arrangements, like my mother's famously extravagant garden at the Palm Beach estate. She is fully aware that I have a dangerous allergy to ragweed pollen, but I learned long ago that her affection for her garden far outweighs any concern she might have for my physical well-being. "Ethan, you simply must learn to live with nature," she once remarked, her tone hovering somewhere between a joke and a genuine reprimand. I just offered a tight smile in response, but I never let my guard down. "You excited, kiddo?" I asked, forcing a note of cheerfulness into my voice that I didn't feel. Olivia pulled out one earbud and gave a small shrug. "It's fine, I guess, but it feels off. Grandma and Grandpa were so insistent about us coming. They're never this excited to see us." I managed a small laugh and patted her on the arm. "Hey, don't overthink it. It's just an anniversary party. We'll have some food, make some small talk, and be back home before you know it." But as I navigated the winding roads that led up to my parents' mansion, her words replayed in my head. "She sees things more clearly than I'm willing to admit," and a part of me knew she was sensing the same unease I was trying so desperately to ignore. My parents' estate sits perched on a bluff overlooking the ocean, an ostentatious display of modern architecture with walls of glass and a garden so perfect it looked artificial. As Olivia and I got out of the car, the party was already in full swing. Waitstaff in starched white jackets circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and the smooth sound of a live jazz trio drifted from speakers hidden among the landscaping. My mother's garden was on full display, an explosion of roses, lilies, and countless other flowers I couldn't identify, their combined scent hanging heavy in the warm, late afternoon air. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I took a slow, shallow breath, my hand instinctively patting the side of my bag. My inhaler was right where it should be. I was just being paranoid. My mother materialized the second she spotted us, a vision in a stunning crimson-colored dress. "Oh, Olivia, my sweet girl," she exclaimed, sweeping my daughter into a hug. Her embrace was tight, but her gaze shot right past Olivia to me, her eyes scanning me from head to toe as if she were taking inventory. "Ethan, you look prosperous. Success certainly agrees with you, doesn't it?" I pasted a smile on my face, deliberately ignoring the subtle, loaded way she said the word success. "You look stunning, Mom, as always." My father was next, striding over in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He clapped me on the shoulder a little harder than necessary. "Ethan, glad you could make it. I was starting to think you were too busy signing books and giving speeches to bother with your old man. No time for family anymore, eh?" His words were the same old digs, honed to a sharp point over years of practice. "I always have time for my family, Dad," I answered, keeping my voice even and calm. He let out a short, hollow laugh, the smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Good, because today is important. The whole family is here to celebrate." Mark appeared just a moment later, his suit looking a bit rumpled and his grin a little too wide. "Ethan, my brother, it's been too long." He pulled me into a hug that felt more like a required gesture than a genuine greeting. He quickly turned his attention to Olivia, tousling her hair. "Look at you, Olivia, growing up so fast. My kids are over there dying to see you." Olivia offered a polite smile, but I saw the wariness in her expression. She gave a small nod and headed off toward the edge of the garden where Mark's two boisterous blonde children were chasing each other through the flower beds. I watched her go, that familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach again, but I pushed it down and tried to disappear into the hum of the party. The whole event felt like a meticulously produced play. My father held court in the center of the garden, regaling the guests with a dramatic, embellished retelling of his and my mother's wedding day, his voice resonating with the practiced confidence of a seasoned performer. The crowd, a mix of old friends, business partners, and a handful of prominent real estate developers, laughed on cue and dutifully raised their glasses. My mother moved through the tables like a queen holding court, her smile blinding. But I couldn't help but notice how her eyes kept darting in my direction, as if she were tracking my every move. And Mark, as expected, was playing his part as the happy-go-lucky younger son to perfection. He cornered me by the bar, pressing a glass of wine into my hand. "All right, big brother, give me the scoop," he said, leaning in conspiratorially. "How's the new book coming along? I heard a rumor you're about to close another massive deal with your publisher." I took a small step back, creating a bit of space between us. "It's going well, Mark. How are things with you? Everything good over at Dad's company?" Mark let out a booming laugh, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Oh, you know how it is. Real estate is always booming. It's not as exciting as your life, of course, Mr. Best-selling author." He slapped my back with a force that felt more like a blow than a friendly gesture, a strange aggression simmering just beneath the surface. Just as I was trying to figure out how to escape the conversation, Olivia came running up to us. She was slightly breathless, and her eyes were wide with a worry that instantly put me on high alert. "Dad," she said, her voice quiet but insistent, "did you bring your inhaler?" I put my wine glass down on a nearby table, my brow furrowed in confusion. "Yeah, of course, it's in my bag, right where I always keep it." I gestured toward the chair where I'd left my things a few yards away. Olivia's eyes followed my finger, but when she looked back at me, the anxiety was still there. "You should go check on it, Dad," she urged. "I don't know why, I have a bad feeling." I forced a reassuring smile, but her strange premonition sent a jolt of alarm through me. "Okay, sweetie, I'll go make sure it's there." I started to move toward my bag, but Mark immediately blocked my path, his hand clamping down on my arm. "Hey, where are you going?" he said, his voice overly cheerful. "Dad wants you to meet some of his business associates. They've been dying to meet the famous writer in the family." He laughed again, a loud, forced sound, and started pulling me toward a cluster of men in expensive suits gathered around my father. "Mark, wait a second," I insisted, trying to wrench my arm from his grasp. "I just need to get my bag." But he held on tight, practically dragging me across the lawn. "Relax, Ethan. Your bag isn't going anywhere. Who's going to mess with Ethan Hayes' stuff?" He shot me a wink, but his smile was rigid, unnatural. Something was definitely wrong. I looked back over my shoulder at Olivia. She was still standing in the same spot, her anxious gaze fixed on me. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to go back and check on my bag. But Mark was relentless, shoving me into the circle of my father's colleagues before I could protest further. My father was in his element, his voice booming as he presented me like some prize he'd won. "And this is my son Ethan. You've probably read his books, a self-made man. Who would have guessed the little daydreamer would have done so well for himself, eh?" The men laughed and raised their glasses, but I could only manage a distracted nod, my thoughts still snagged on my bag and Olivia's strange warning. I tried to back away. "Dad, excuse me for a second, I just need to..." But my father's arm shot around my shoulders, holding me firmly in place. His voice was low but carried an unmistakable command. "Just relax, Ethan. This is your mother's and my day. You need to be here." I struggled to keep my composure, but the vague unease I'd been feeling all day had now morphed into a cold dread that was seeping into my bones. My eyes found Olivia again. She was standing near the edge of the garden talking to one of Mark's kids, and then, without any warning, I heard a piercing scream. It was Olivia's voice. "Dad, Dad, help!" She was on the ground, curled up on the grass and clutching her stomach, her face twisted in agony. "My stomach," she gasped. "It hurts so much." My world stopped. I shoved my way through the startled guests, dropping to my knees beside her. "Olivia, what is it? What's wrong?" I pressed my hand to her forehead, searching for a fever, but she just curled in on herself, her grip on her stomach tightening. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and her voice was a thin, trembling whisper. "It hurts so bad, Dad. Please just take me to the hospital, please." There was no hesitation. I lifted her into my arms, her small frame shaking uncontrollably against my chest. A low murmur rippled through the party guests as people started to turn and stare. My mother hurried over, her expression a mask of concern. Whether it was real or just part of the performance, I couldn't tell. "Ethan, what's happening? Is Olivia all right?" "She has a severe stomach ache. I'm taking her to the hospital," I said, my voice tight with panic as I started moving toward the driveway. My father intercepted me, his tone calm but firm. "Hold on, Ethan, let me call for an ambulance. You're in no state to drive." Mark materialized beside him, blocking my way. "Yeah, man, just wait for the paramedics. They'll be here in a few minutes. Let us take her, we'll handle it." But Olivia, still cradled in my arms, shook her head, her movements frantic. "No!" she choked out. "I want Dad to take me. Dad, please!" Her voice was desperate and her eyes were wild, as if she were trying to communicate something vital that I wasn't grasping. I looked from my mother's carefully arranged face to my father's authoritative stare, and then to Mark. They were all standing there, a united front trying to keep me from leaving, and for a split second I felt like I was trapped in a cage with a pack of smiling predators. "No," I said, my voice hard and unyielding. "I'm taking her myself." "Thanks, Mom, Dad, Mark, but I can handle this." I pushed past Mark, holding Olivia tight against me as I strode toward my car. As I left the manicured perfection of the garden and passed through the main gates of the estate, I stopped dead in my tracks. A small delivery truck was parked at the entrance, and two men were in the process of unloading massive bouquets of flowers. I recognized them instantly. They weren't roses or lilies. They were scraggly plants with dark green leaves and clusters of tiny, sickly yellow blossoms that gave off a sharp, acrid scent. Ragweed. The one plant I am dangerously allergic to, the one my mother knows can send me into a full-blown asthma attack, one that could be life-threatening if I didn't have my inhaler. My chest constricted, not just from the pollen already tainting the air, but from a sudden, horrifying realization. I looked down at Olivia, who was still pretending to be in pain, but her eyes darted to the truck and then back to me, a clear signal that she had seen it too. I squeezed her hand and quickened my pace. "Dad, be careful," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with conviction. "I don't think this is an accident." I didn't answer her, but a cold certainty settled in my stomach. She was right. This wasn't just an anniversary party, it was a setup, a carefully laid trap, and I had been seconds away from stepping right into it. I rushed Olivia to the car, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air outside the gates was cleaner, free from the cloying perfume of my mother's garden. But my lungs still felt tight, and it had nothing to do with allergies. The ache was from the chilling dread that was now spreading through my entire body. That truck, overflowing with the one plant that could kill me, was still parked at the gate like a silent, ominous threat. I settled Olivia into the passenger seat, my hands shaking slightly as I checked on her. Her face was still twisted as if in pain, her hands gripping her abdomen, but her eyes were alert and clear, not clouded with agony. "Dad, we have to go," Olivia whispered, her voice sharp with urgency. "Get me to the hospital now." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and slammed the car into drive. As we sped down the winding road, leaving the glittering lights of the party behind us, I risked a glance over at my daughter. She was no longer clutching her stomach. She was sitting perfectly upright, her clear eyes staring out the window, her expression serious and focused. I slowed the car, pulling onto the shoulder of a deserted stretch of road where the pale glow of a single streetlight illuminated her face. "Olivia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "are you all right? Was your stomach really hurting?" She turned to face me, her gaze a mixture of fear and resolve. "No, Dad," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I wasn't sick, I was faking it. I had to get you out of there." I just stared at her, my mind struggling to process her words. "Faking it? Olivia, why? What is happening?" She took a deep, steadying breath as if she were gathering her thoughts before speaking. "Dad, I think Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Mark are trying to hurt you. I don't know how, but that whole party, and it felt wrong." My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced myself to keep my voice even. "Tell me everything, Olivia. What did you see?" She looked down at her hands, which were twisting in her lap, and then met my eyes again. They were blazing with an intensity that was pure Claire. "Dad, it felt wrong from the minute we got there. Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't stop staring at you, but it wasn't like they were happy to see you. It was like they were sizing you up, like they were planning something. And Uncle Mark kept pulling you all over the place, making sure you couldn't just sit down and relax. I saw him talking to one of the waiters, the one with the dark hair. A few minutes later, that same waiter was standing right next to your chair, pretending to clear glasses, but he kept looking at your bag. Dad, I think he took your inhaler." A wave of ice washed over me. The scene replayed in my mind. Mark yanking me away from my chair, his forced laughter and constant chatter a deliberate distraction. I remembered him physically stopping me from going back to my bag, the way his eyes had flickered away when I mentioned the inhaler. "Keep going, Olivia," I said, my voice now raspy with a terrible, dawning horror. "I went over to your chair to check," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. "And just like I thought, your inhaler wasn't in the side pocket, it was gone." Her voice trembled slightly then, as if she were steeling herself for what she had to say next. "And then I saw Grandma. She was standing by the fountain at the far end of the garden talking on her phone. She was whispering, so I couldn't hear all of it. But she kept looking around like she was afraid of being overheard. I heard her say something about the flowers and making sure they were on time. Dad, I know about your ragweed allergy. We learned about it in science class. If you have an asthma attack from the pollen, it's really, really dangerous. Especially without your inhaler, it could kill you." My hands clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I tried to absorb the full weight of what Olivia was telling me. My inhaler, stolen. A truck full of ragweed conveniently arriving at the party. Mark, my mother, my father, all of them acting their parts in a perfectly staged drama, while my 14-year-old daughter saw the truth I had been too blind or too unwilling to see. "Are you certain about this, Olivia?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but her expression was firm. "I'm positive, Dad. I don't know what their exact plan was, but I knew that if you stayed at that party any longer, you would be in real danger. So I faked the stomachache. I thought if I caused a big enough scene, you'd have to leave right away and they wouldn't be able to stop you." I stared at her, my heart aching with a strange combination of overwhelming pride and profound sorrow. Olivia. My little girl had just saved my life, She had seen the monstrous truth that I, with all my worldly success and supposed wisdom, had refused to acknowledge, that my own family, my own blood, was plotting against me. I pulled her into a fierce hug, burying my face in her hair. "You are incredible, kiddo," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." She hugged me back just as tightly, but then she pulled away, her eyes deadly serious. "Dad, I think they're after your money. I heard Uncle Mark talking to one of the guests before. He said something about assets and how things would be so much easier once he's out of the picture." I didn't get all of it, but I know it wasn't good. I took a long, shaky breath, fighting to keep my emotions in check. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed. My wealth, the Key Biscayne estate, the publishing deals, the investment portfolio, had always been a source of intense fascination for my parents and Mark. My father's constant questions about my earnings, my mother's prying into my finances, and Mark's resentful stares, it all made a sickening kind of sense now. But to actually conspire to hurt me, to intentionally trigger a potentially fatal allergic reaction, all for money? The very idea sent a tremor of revulsion through me. "Olivia, did you see anything else?" I asked, my mind racing to collect every detail. "Anything at all, no matter how small it seemed?" She frowned, concentrating. "When I was with my cousins, I saw Grandpa give something to that same waiter, the one who was by your bag. I think it might have been your inhaler, but I couldn't see it clearly. After he gave it to him, Grandpa patted the waiter on the shoulder like he was giving him instructions. Then he looked over at Grandma and she gave him this tiny little nod. I don't know what it meant, but it creeped me out." I took Olivia's hand, squeezing it gently to comfort her. But a hot, white rage was beginning to build inside me. My family, my father, my mother, my own brother, they had orchestrated this entire thing. They knew about my allergy. They knew that without my inhaler, an attack could be fatal. And they had not only stolen my only defense, but they had also arranged for the weapon to be delivered right to their door. But why? Was it just for the money? Was it jealousy? Or was it some twisted combination of both? "Dad, what are we going to do?" Olivia asked, her voice a mixture of fear and defiance. "They're going to figure out I was faking it. They're going to try something else." I looked at my daughter and I felt a surge of pride so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. Olivia wasn't just intelligent, she was courageous. She had single-handedly pulled me from the jaws of a trap, and now it was my turn to protect her, and myself. "First things first, I'm getting you home where you'll be safe," I said, my voice firm. "And then I'm going to figure out exactly how to deal with this. I promise you, Olivia, I will not let them harm us." She nodded, but the fear still lingered in her eyes. "I trust you, Dad, but I don't ever want to go back to that house again." I drove on, heading back toward Miami. The highway was dark and quiet, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the distant roar of the ocean. But inside me, a tempest was raging. My family, the people I had spent a lifetime trying to love in spite of their coldness, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way imaginable. And if it hadn't been for Olivia, I might not have been alive to even feel this anger. When we finally got back to our house on Key Biscayne, I sank onto the living room sofa and pulled Olivia down to sit next to me. "You saved my life tonight, Olivia," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever thank you enough." She offered a small smile, but it was tinged with a sadness that broke my heart. "I just need you to be safe, Dad. We already lost Mom. I can't lose you too." Her words were a blade straight to the heart. I pulled her into a hug, holding on to her warmth as if it were a lifeline. And in that moment, I knew I had to take action. This wasn't just about protecting my money anymore. It was about protecting the fragile, precious life that Olivia and I had managed to build from the ashes of our grief. My family may have set a trap for me, but I would be damned if I was going to let them win. The next morning, I placed a call to my attorney, David Cohen, a calm, measured man in his 50s with a mind like a steel trap. I'd been with David since my first book hit the bestseller list. He was the one who had helped me navigate everything from publishing deals to estate planning. I told him everything that had happened at the party, the missing inhaler, the sudden arrival of the ragweed, and all the disturbing details Olivia had observed. David listened patiently, his silence punctuated only by the sound of his pen scratching furiously on a legal pad. "Ethan," he said when I finally finished my story, "these are extremely serious accusations. If what you and Olivia are saying is true, we're not just talking about a family dispute. This could be conspiracy to commit assault or even attempted murder." He paused. "How do you want to handle this?" My eyes went to Olivia, who was sitting at the kitchen island picking at a piece of toast. "I want to go to the police," I said, my voice resolute, "and I want to file for a restraining order. I don't want my parents or Mark anywhere near me or my daughter ever again." David didn't hesitate. "Understood. I'll get the paperwork for the protective order started immediately. But for a police report to have any teeth, we're going to need evidence. Olivia is a credible witness, but the testimony of a 14-year-old, however compelling, might not be enough to get them to launch a full investigation. Do you have anything else? Security camera footage from the party? Any incriminating texts or emails?" I shook my head, a wave of frustration washing over me. "No, David, I have nothing tangible, just what Olivia saw and a gut feeling that tells me she's right. But I know my family. I know how much they resent my success, and I have no doubt they would do anything to get their hands on my money." David was quiet for a moment. "All right," he said finally. "Then we'll start with what we have. I strongly recommend that you establish an irrevocable trust, effective immediately," he continued. "Transfer all of your major assets into it and name Olivia as the sole beneficiary upon reaching legal age. This will guarantee that no matter what happens to you, your family will not be able to get their hands on your estate." He paused. "Do you want to proceed with that?" "Yes," I said without a second of hesitation. "Do it. I want Olivia to be protected financially and in every other way." The next few days were a blur of meetings and paperwork as I worked with David to set up the trust. I moved everything, the Key Biscayne house, the contents of my bank and investment accounts, all future book royalties, into the trust, with Olivia designated as the beneficiary when she turns 18. David structured the legal documents to be airtight, ensuring that no one, not my parents and certainly not Mark, could ever touch a penny of it. "This is the most effective way to protect her," David said as I signed the last of the documents. "If your family's motives are purely financial, they'll have to abandon their plans once they realize your wealth is completely inaccessible to them." I also had David draw up the petition for the restraining order. "I want my parents and Mark legally prohibited from contacting me or Olivia, or from coming anywhere near us," I told him. "They crossed a line and there's no going back." David nodded grimly. "I'll file the motion with the court this afternoon. Given the circumstances you and Olivia described, especially with a minor involved, it's highly likely a judge will grant it." He looked at me, his expression serious. "But Ethan, are you prepared for this? Once you take this step, you are permanently severing ties with your family. There's no undoing it." My gaze drifted out the window to the rooftop where Olivia was sitting in a lounge chair, lost in a book, the sun catching the highlights in her brown hair. "I'm sure," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "They stopped being my family a long time ago. Family doesn't try to kill you." About a week later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally answering. Her voice was as syrupy sweet as ever, but I could hear the strain underneath it. "Ethan, darling, I heard you went to the police. What on earth is going on? Olivia had a little stomach bug and then you just disappeared without a word. Your father and I have been worried sick." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, and forced myself to speak calmly. "Mom, you know exactly what happened. My inhaler vanished from my bag. A truckload of ragweed was delivered to your party. Olivia saw you on the phone whispering about flowers. She saw Dad give my inhaler to a waiter. Did you really think I wouldn't put it all together?" There was a long, loaded silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother let out a high, brittle laugh. "Oh, Ethan, you have such an overactive imagination. There was no conspiracy. Your inhaler must have just gotten misplaced, and the flowers were simply for decoration. I completely forgot about your silly little allergy. That's all." My hand clenched into a fist, the rage I'd been suppressing flaring to life. "You know I have a life-threatening allergy to ragweed. You know I can't be without my inhaler. And you want me to believe this was all just one big coincidence? Ethan, I am your mother. I would never do anything to hurt you," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch, but her words were hollow, meaningless. Suddenly, my father's voice erupted from the speaker, loud and domineering. "That's enough, Ethan. You're being disrespectful. We were trying to have a nice family celebration. If you didn't want to be here, you could have just left. You didn't have to invent some ridiculous paranoid fantasy." I took a slow, deep breath, letting the anger settle into a cold, hard resolve. "Dad, Mom, listen to me very carefully. I have created an irrevocable trust. All of my assets now belong to Olivia, and none of you will ever see a dime of it. I have also filed for and been granted a restraining order. From this moment on, you are legally forbidden from contacting or approaching me or my daughter. If you violate that order, I will call the police." Another long, heavy silence stretched out. Then Mark's voice came on the line, shaking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing? We're your family. You can't honestly believe we would try to hurt you over some crazy story Olivia made up." "Don't you dare bring Olivia into this," I snarled, my control finally snapping. "She is smarter and more perceptive than the three of you put together, and I believe every word she said. This is the last conversation we will ever have. Do not contact me again." I ended the call, my hand trembling. A moment later, Olivia came into the study, her expression anxious. "Was that Grandma and Grandpa?" I nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Don't worry, sweetie, it's all taken care of. They won't be bothering us anymore." In the weeks that followed, I dedicated myself to rebuilding a sense of normalcy and peace in our lives. David confirmed that the restraining order was in full effect, and that the trust was legally ironclad. A profound sense of relief washed over me, but the wound of my family's betrayal was still raw. The people who were supposed to love me, the people I had tried so hard to connect with despite their coldness, had proven to be my greatest enemies. But every time I looked at Olivia, at her bright, courageous face, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision. She was all that mattered, and I would burn down the world to keep her safe. In the aftermath of that final, ugly phone call, our house on Key Biscayne truly became our fortress. The rhythmic sound of the waves breaking on the shore at night was no longer just a peaceful backdrop. It was the sound of survival, a constant reminder that we had made it through the storm. I went back to my work, writing new books and speaking to crowds, but my purpose had shifted. Every word I wrote, every speech I delivered was now infused with a new resolve. To protect Olivia, to defend the life we had pieced back together, and to never ever let the darkness of my past touch us again. Olivia, my brave, brilliant 14-year-old, was the sun my universe orbited. She went back to school, tackled dense novels that made my head spin, and belted out pop songs in what she still cheerfully referred to as her cat in a blender voice. But I could see a change in her, a new layer of maturity that she had acquired at too high a price. She never brought up her grandparents or her uncle, but I would sometimes find her staring out at the ocean, her expression lost in thought, and I knew she was replaying the events of that night. I knew she was grappling not only with the loss of her mother, but with the painful new knowledge that the people who were supposed to cherish her had been willing to sacrifice her father. "You doing okay, kiddo?" I asked her one morning as we were having breakfast on the rooftop patio. She was picking at a piece of toast, the morning light catching in her hair and making it shine like spun gold. She gave me a smile, but it didn't quite erase the sadness in her eyes. "I'm okay, Dad. It's just, I still can't believe Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Mark would do something like that. I thought family was supposed to be the people who loved you no matter what." I put my coffee mug down and reached for her hand. "I used to believe that too, Olivia. But I've learned that family isn't always about who you share blood with. Real family is about the people who show up for you, who protect you, who love you for who you are. Like you and me." She nodded and her expression brightened a little. "And I have you. That's all I need." Her words were a balm on my soul, but they were also a stark reminder of my responsibility. I had to keep moving forward, not just for my own sake, but for hers. I had lost Claire, and now I had lost my entire birth family. But I still had Olivia, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure she had a happy, safe, and love-filled existence. The months that followed were quieter and more peaceful than I could have imagined. I poured myself into my work and finished the manuscript for my new book, Shadow and Flame, a novel about surviving betrayal and finding the courage to hope again. I wrote it from a place of raw emotion, channeling everything I had been through, thinking constantly of Olivia and the incredible thing she had done for me. My publisher accepted it immediately, and soon after I received an invitation to be a keynote speaker at a large literary festival in Boston. This time I decided to take Olivia with me. "You're my inspiration for this one," I told her when she looked up at me, surprised by the offer. "I want you to be there." Olivia's face lit up, and a few weeks later we flew to Boston together. Standing on that stage in front of 1,000 people, I shared my story, not just as an author, but as a father, as a man who had learned what it meant to get back up after being knocked down by the people he should have been able to trust the most. When I concluded my speech, the room erupted in a standing ovation, but I only had eyes for one person. Olivia was in the front row, clapping harder than anyone, a look of pure pride on her face that made me feel like I could take on the world. Back home in Miami, Olivia started her freshman year of high school. Like any parent, I was anxious, worried that the transition would be difficult for her. But Olivia, as always, thrived. She joined the school's literary magazine, where she argued passionately about the merits of classic novels, and she even started writing her own short stories. "Dad, I think I got the writing gene from you," she announced one evening, handing me a story she'd written about a young sorceress who uses her wits to save her kingdom. I chuckled as I read it, but I knew that her story was more than just fantasy. In a very real sense, Olivia had been my savior too. One crisp autumn morning, as I was dropping Olivia off at school, I noticed a woman I hadn't seen before standing near the entrance. She was tall and slender, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was wearing a simple gray cardigan over a floral dress, and she had a smile that was both gentle and incredibly bright. Olivia spotted her and ran over, giving her a hug like they were old friends. "Dad, come meet my teacher," she called out, her voice full of excitement. "This is Ms. Julia Evans. She teaches my English and creative writing classes." I walked over and extended my hand, and Julia took it. Her grip was warm and firm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Evans. Thank you for taking such good care of Olivia. She talks about your class constantly." Julia's smile widened, and her green eyes sparkled. "Please call me Julia, Mr. Hayes, and Olivia is a phenomenal student. She's brilliant and kind, and she has a bigger heart than anyone I've ever met. You must be so proud of her." I looked at Olivia, who was beaming at her teacher's praise. "Yes," I said, my voice full of emotion. "I am. She's my whole world." From that day forward, I started to notice Julia more. It wasn't just because she was Olivia's favorite teacher. It was because of the genuine warmth and intelligence that seemed to radiate from her. Julia didn't just teach books. She taught her students how to connect with them. Olivia would come home full of stories about how Julia had organized open-ended class debates, encouraged them to write about their own experiences, and even started a voluntary after-school poetry workshop. Ms. Evans says that everyone has a story inside them that deserves to be told, Olivia told me one evening, her eyes shining with inspiration. "She makes me think about Mom, but in a good way, not a sad way." Julia and I began to cross paths more frequently at various school functions. I volunteered to chaperone a field trip for the literary magazine, and Julia ended up sitting next to me on the bus, where we spent the entire ride talking about our favorite authors. She was a die-hard Jane Austen fan, while I argued for the genius of Faulkner. The conversation was easy and playful, and I found myself laughing, truly laughing for the first time in a very long time. It was a feeling of lightness I thought I had lost forever. One afternoon, after I'd picked Olivia up from a late-running workshop, Julia caught up with us in the parking lot. "I was just heading to that little coffee shop on the corner," she said, a hopeful look in her eyes. "I wanted to thank you again for all your help with the magazine. Could I treat you both to a hot chocolate?" Olivia, with her usual uncanny perception, shot me a subtle wink when Julia wasn't looking. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Dad, Ms. Evans is awesome," she said conspiratorially. "You should totally ask her out on a real date." I could feel a blush creeping up my neck, and I shot Olivia a look of mock outrage, but she just giggled. After that, I started manufacturing reasons to see Julia. I invited her to a local book signing I was doing, and to my surprise, she showed up, bringing me a vintage leather-bound copy of a Walt Whitman collection as a gift. "I thought you might appreciate this," she said, and the warmth in her smile sent my heart into a gallop. My relationship with Julia blossomed slowly, organically, like a tide coming in. We started taking long walks along the beach on Key Biscayne, talking about everything. Our lives, our dreams, the scars we both carried from our pasts. I told her all about Claire, about the suffocating grief of her loss, and eventually I even told her what my family had done. Julia listened without an ounce of judgment, her hand finding mine as she simply said, "You and Olivia are two of the strongest people I've ever met. Not everyone could have survived that." Olivia, for her part, was completely smitten with Julia. She started referring to her as our Julia, and insisted on inviting her over for dinner at least once a week. One evening, as I stood in the doorway of the kitchen watching Julia and Olivia laugh together while they attempted to make homemade gnocchi, I felt a sense of contentment so profound it almost brought me to tears. Olivia caught my eye from across the room and gave me another one of her conspiratorial winks. "Dad," she mouthed silently, "I really like her. You should ask her to stick around." I laughed and pulled her into a hug when she came over to me. "You're becoming quite the little matchmaker, aren't you?" A year passed, and Julia became an essential part of our lives. We never rushed things, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was falling in love with her. It wasn't just because of her kindness or her sharp mind. It was because of the way she loved Olivia, as if she were her own. One evening, the three of us were on the rooftop watching the sun bleed into the horizon. Julia was holding my hand, and Olivia, who was sitting between us, looked from me to Julia and then back again, her smile radiant. "Dad," she said quietly, "I think Mom would be really happy to see us like this." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I think so too, Olivia." Looking back on it all, I know that the scars from a betrayal that deep will never completely fade, but they can heal. My family, my parents, my brother had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. They failed not only because of Olivia's courage and quick thinking, but because I finally found the strength to fight back and protect what was truly important. Olivia, with her fierce intelligence and her even fiercer heart, had saved me from their trap. And in doing so, she had taught me the most important lesson of my life, that family has nothing to do with blood. It's about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. And Julia brought the light back into my life. She didn't replace Claire, she simply showed me that it was possible for something new and beautiful to grow, even on scorched earth. I looked at Olivia and Julia, the two women who had remade my world, and I knew that no matter how dark the past had been, our future was going to be bright. One afternoon, as the three of us were walking along the water's edge, Olivia paused. She bent down, picked up a perfectly smooth gray stone, and skipped it across the surface of the ocean. "Dad," she said, her voice soft, "I think Mom is watching over us. And I think she's happy because we're happy." I took Olivia's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her grasp, and I glanced at Julia, who was smiling at us with so much love it took my breath away. "I think so too, kiddo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And I think she would be so proud of you for saving my life." Julia squeezed my hand, her touch a silent promise of all the good days to come. "You know, Ethan," she said, her voice full of wonder, "I always thought there were some wounds that just never heal. But seeing you and Olivia together, you've made me believe that love really can fix anything." I pulled her closer, my heart feeling full and steady for the first time in years. "You're right," I said. "Love and finding the right people at the right time." In that moment, standing on the sand between Olivia and Julia, with the sound of the ocean and the fiery glow of the sunset wrapping around us, the most important lesson of my life became crystal clear. The most dangerous enemies can be the ones who share your blood, like my family, who preyed on my vulnerabilities out of pure greed. But I was saved. I was saved by Olivia's fierce intuition, her unwavering love, and her incredible courage. And even after all the pain, after a heart I thought was shattered beyond repair, I had found a new reason to believe in love with Julia. She wasn't a replacement for Claire. She was a reminder that life will always give you a new chapter, as long as you're brave enough to turn the page. I watched Olivia run ahead, her laughter carrying on the wind as she chased the receding tide. Julia leaned her head on my shoulder. "We're going to be all right, aren't we?" she whispered. I nodded, a real, genuine smile spreading across my face. "More than all right, Julia. We have each other." Life never promises to be easy. The scars of my family's betrayal are still there, but they no longer have the power to cause me pain. Olivia taught me that a child's love can be a powerful shield, and Julia taught me that a broken heart can learn to beat again. And with the two of them by my side, I knew with absolute certainty that no shadow from my past could ever touch us again.